Here's a quick explanation of Robert Merton's functions and dysfunctions as applied to the functional analysis perspectives. Real quick, a couple of definitions. Functions are the beneficial consequences of people's actions. Dysfunctions are the consequences that harm society. More often than not, when you look at those two, it's really all about equilibrium. The functions are the good parts, the dysfunctions are the bad parts, and in the end they balance themselves out and kind of keep society stable. Within functions, we have to look at both functions and dysfunctions. We also have to look at those manifest and latent functions, or the intended and unintended functions. What it really comes down to is manifest functions are intended functions, and we use them all the time. Say, for instance, there's a law that's passed, the manifest function is whatever that law is stated, but the unintended function is a latent function. Maybe the law that's passed causes people to unnecessarily die and nobody knew about it. Well, that's an unintended consequences. Latent functions tend to be dysfunctions, but they're not always dysfunctions. Your book gives a great example of how latent functions, it lays out a law that says that for every baby, the government is going to give $10,000 to every mother that has a baby because of low birth rate, and the government wanted to repopulate. Well, that's great. And some latent functions might be that diaper sales go up or baby clothing sales go up, and those are all good. They're good for the economy, so those would be functions, but most of our dysfunctions tend to be latent as well. So let's apply that to what we've been doing in class. Manifest and latent functions as applied to Google Apps and education. Some of the manifest functions that I put together, quite simply, we can go paperless. That's a function that I believe in. I think that we can go paperless and move to more of a digital environment where we don't have to print a bunch of paper, excuse me. Additionally, another manifest function is to get you used to using technology, to give you the technology that you use every day and start really using it in the classroom instead of just having it as, something that we do once in a while. We should be able to use the technology almost all the time. Additionally, I want you to think more globally and more business-minded. When it comes to collaborating, working together, those are things that you're going to need to do as citizens as you move out into the workforce, thinking globally, being able to really work together with a number of different people from a number of different areas to accomplish whatever task it is you want to accomplish. And then finally, I want you thinking about your future. And if this is something that you might use in the future, I want you to be able to use it so that you're not left out in the dark or you're 2 steps behind someone that hasn't ever used it. Hey, if you're the person that can say, hey, let's start a Google Doc and we can all work on it together, that gives you an edge compared to some competitors that maybe never have used it before. You certainly can't collaborate in real time when you use, say, Microsoft Word. That makes it's a lot more difficult to do. Latent functions, well, honestly, I didn't expect teaching Google Apps in education to take so much time. I thought I'd be able to give it to you and you'd be able to grab onto it 100% without any issues. That was a latent function. I don't mind spending the time, but it's not something that I necessarily wanted to do. It's also caused an awful lot of confusion. In class, when we were doing the QR code project, a lot of you were confused, and maybe I didn't explain that quite well enough or show you enough examples. I thought being able to use Google Docs and log in, you'd be able to do just fine with what you had. Clearly that wasn't the case from the start, but I think we're starting to get it. Eventually, we're going to have some malfunctions. Maybe not the blue screen of death, but we will have some malfunctions, and we'll have to work through those as well. Whether it's a hardware malfunction or you can't get to a website that I want you to go to, something like that it might wreck one of my lessons because it was all online. That might struggle. What if the complete server goes down and my lesson was planned specifically around Google Docs? Well, then I have to go to plan B, and that's on me. And then finally, if the wireless connection goes down and we're using Google Docs or we're using the internet again, we're going to be out of luck when it comes down to being able to use that, and we'll have to move on to a plan B. Now, if we look at the latent functions, which ones are dysfunctions and which ones are latent functions, or they're not so bad? The time issue isn't so bad. You're learning not just how to use Google Docs, and it's going to take you time to use that, but you'll have that skill. Being confused, that's on me. That's a latent dysfunction. Having that confusion isn't something I like to have. Having a blue screen of death, having some malfunctions, that's definitely going to be a dysfunction as well. And the wireless connectivity, maybe that's a dysfunction, maybe it's not. Even if we go back to the malfunctions, maybe that's not necessarily a total dysfunction. It just makes me think on my feet a little bit and move to a different method of delivery or a different lesson for the day. Being able to think on my feet it's a good skill to have, so maybe that's not a total dysfunction, but it is a little bit of a dysfunction. At this point, you should be able to have a better understanding of Robert Merton's functions and manifest and latent functions, and functions and dysfunctions as applied to sociology, as applied to Google Apps and education, and you should be able to use what I've given you here to be able to complete the Google document on the manifest and latent function worksheet. Thanks.